Our next person is a good friend who surprised me a while back before he wrote his first book. And he said, I'm going to write my book called The World of Good. And he caught me when I heard that. And I was like, man, I got to get to know this guy. So I want to bring up Gethin Nadin, a good friend of ours who's going to speak today. When we're at the end of work, it not only changes us, when we are kind at work, when we're kind at work, it not only changes us, but an entire organization. And Gethin, I'm going to give you a hand.
Very good.
As you head out, do it. Take it there.
Well, first of all, whoever put me straight after Paul, thanks for that. That's quite a difficult act to follow. What an amazing story. And yeah, the idea of kindness becoming a new kind of weapon will probably stay with me for quite a long time. And thank you, Steve, for that lovely introduction. As you know, and as many people listening know, you are a beacon of kindness in this HR community. So thank you. You've all heard from some very inspirational people today, but I'm going to go somewhere slightly different. I felt for quite a long time, and it's a big theme of my book, that work plays such a huge part of our lives and how we identify, that when we experience unkindness at work, I think it affects us quite significantly. And that's certainly been my experience. And so today I'm going to try and explain to you why I think that when we are kind at work, it not only changes us, but it changes our entire organization. And it feels like it's a very easy thing for us to do, to talk about kindness at work, but far more difficult for us to actually do something about it. I think it's very easy for us to aspire to be kind at work, but I think the way we often treat employees isn't very kind at all. And I think we just have to look at this year. Despite all the hard work that employees all over the world have put in to help their employers stay afloat during this pandemic, we still don't treat them with the kindness that they need and that they deserve. And I think never is this more obvious than the long-standing processes we put in place that serve to fuel people's anxieties and make them feel bad about themselves. And in my experience all over the world, even the most progressive organizations fail to realize some of those very basic ways that we contribute to poor employee well-being. And that, to me, is quite unkind. And I want to tell you a story of a conference I spoke at last year, where I spoke to an organization just before I did this conference that did loads of great things for their people. They gave Christmas bonuses, they had great staff parties, they had free pizza days, they gave out gifts often, had lots of fun events in the office, etc. And they really understood that their culture was really important to their business success. And they really understood that having an inclusive and kind culture was important to their business success. But one day this company came to me and asked me what more they should be doing. And I kind of said, why are you asking me? Ask them what they want, ask them what they need. And this was a small enough business that they could have actually got every employee in the room at once and just asked them. And they eventually asked employees what they could be doing to make their lives better. And the answers surprised them. And the employees said that the culture stuff like parties and gifts didn't really matter when they felt like the basics weren't being there. So they said things like, you don't pay us sick pay. This was a company that did all these great things, but didn't give their employees sick pay. So employees were frequently coming to work ill because they couldn't afford to not be in work. And again, that just doesn't feel like a kind thing for us to do as an organization. They also said that they only gave minimum legal requirement on annual leave. And again, what kind of message does that send to employees that you're giving them the very basic minimum that you have to give them? And those people had partners and husbands and wives that had more generous levels of annual leave that just didn't match. So these families couldn't go on holiday together because there wasn't enough leave. And that was quite significant, I think, that those staff members didn't think and didn't care about the perks when some of those basic needs weren't being met. And this same company from the outside in looks really progressive and fun and looks like they care of their people. Their culture on social media looked great, but the real story ended up being quite different. And so, as well as this company doing all those other things, they also did things like send thank you cards to each member of staff during the pandemic to tell them that your contribution was valued and that we care about you. But then I heard a story that they forced one of their employees to use their annual leave to attend their father's funeral who died during the pandemic. And so it really seems to me that kindness at work has become more about the things that organizations can be seen to be doing rather than the things they are actually doing. And I feel like celebrating Pride Month means nothing if you can continue to employ homophobic members of staff or have HR policies that don't support diverse people. Celebrating World Mental Health Day means nothing if you're overworking your people or failing to train your managers or not offering enough support to staff. So I feel like organizations, when it comes to kindness, need to stop with the optics and start with the action. And I'll give you an example of how one American organization I had some work with did this last year. So last year I gave a talk at Minds at Work, a mental health conference in the UK. And part of my talk was centered around the fact that employers needed to start admitting that there are problems in their organizations. And when they do that, they can only then start to improve. And one of the biggest problems I see is how we start that employee journey from the very first day with us by telling them we do not trust them. So we do things as organizations like interview candidates many times over, stalk them online, check out their LinkedIn profiles, seek references, but then we put them on probation, which I think is effectively telling that employee, I don't trust you're going to be any good, or I don't trust my decision to give you the job. And I feel like the first few days and months are such an important part of that new relationship, that it's a great example of how we have designed things around the employer, not the employee, which automatically unbalances that relationship from the very first day. And at this conference, the example that came to mind as I was speaking, which wasn't planned, was the idea that imagine you're dating somebody and you fall in love and you make plans to move in with them. But then you stop and you say, do you know what? I'm not entirely sure about this relationship. So I'm going to review it in 3 to 6 months and then I'll make a proper commitment to you. I think if that happened, we'd find ourselves single pretty quickly. And the morning after attending that talk, the people director of a New York profiling firm, Opinium, spoke to their CEO and told them about what I said in my talk. And within just a few hours at that point, the CEO made an open declaration on LinkedIn that thanks to my activism, his words, Opinium would abolish probation periods immediately in each of their global offices. And I spoke to the CEO, James Endersby, as part of this talk, and he told me about his new views on probation periods based on my talk. And this is a direct quote from James. What you're really saying is you do not trust your recruitment process, and it's admitting that you've made the wrong decision. We stop the practice straight away because we want to back the people we hire. We want to back the people we hire. That, to me, is real kindness at work. And I wanted to briefly talk about how we define kindness at work. And there's this kind of growing increased acknowledgement that a more complex life, longer working hours, increased stress, all of this stuff has led us to kind of really reclaim what kindness at work is. And I looked at the Psychology Dictionary online definition, which is a benevolent and helpful action intentionally directed towards another person. It is motivated by the desire to help another and not to gain explicit reward or to avoid explicit punishment. And so that tells me that what we are thinking about here is true altruism and compassion. I feel like kindness at work is where the organization or the person acts to service an employee without the need for reward, regardless of their own needs. And so if we think back to probation periods, probation periods work for the employer, but I've rarely seen them beneficial to the employee. And if we think back to the Opinium CEO, James Endersby, and what he told me, he said, we stop the practice straight away because we want to back the people we hire. They decided that the needs of their employees needed to come over the needs of the employer. They understood that when they make decisions along those lines, everything else would fall into place. And in our own lives, we see that if we give money to a homeless person or we give a homeless person opportunity, it's kindness because we know they need it. If we help an elderly person across the road, it's kindness because we know they need that support. Even simple things like holding the door open for a mother with a pram is kindness because we can see she's struggling. And so I feel like kindness begins with recognizing somebody else's needs and giving it to them without expecting anything in return. And so I urge employers to review their HR policies and consider who they're designed for, and if they were designed in a different way, what that new outcome might be. And I think if we designed those employee experiences with more empathy and understanding, would we do things like let candidates wait for weeks on end before hearing back from us about a job they applied for, if we really thought about what a horrible, anxious time in our lives that is? Would we keep them more updated frequently if we considered the empathy? Would bosses send an email on a Friday night saying we need to have a chat on Monday without thinking about the anxiety that would induce all weekend for an employee? And these, in my view, are unkind things that we do at work. And I also very quickly wanted to briefly talk about measuring kindness at work. Like many things in the workplace, an investment in something, whether that's time or money, seems to always come with an ROI. How can I justify spending time reviewing HR processes to make them kinder? And I think the employer-employee relationship is just that. It's a relationship. And how do we measure relationships? How do you want to measure a relationship? How would you currently measure the support your friends give you? How would you work out the monetary equivalent of a loving relationship? In the workplace, we're obsessed with measuring. Yet I think the single most important part of life, the thing that is universally agreed by philosophers, religious teachings, songwriters, poets, artists, palliative nurses, is love. And we don't measure love. We can't measure love, but we all want it. We mourn it when it's gone, and we strive to replace it when we lose it. So if the single most important part of our lives does not have an ROI, why does everything else have to have one? Sorry, I just had a ding ding. So just to kind of finish off, creating a kinder workplace is about the actions you take next. I hope you're inspired by the things you've heard from the great speakers today, but joining this event is just the start. The real work for you begins now. I think real kindness isn't about using the right hashtag or putting an inspirational poster up in your office. Just like the film Shawshank Redemption, those kind of posters are used to cover up the huge gaps in the way we treat employees, because that's easier than admitting there are problems we need to fix. Because when we admit there are problems, we need to act. So it's easier to tell everyone they're special, and it's easier to send everyone a bottle of wine, and it's easier to tell people you got this. But if you want a culture full of care, kindness, and reciprocity, you have to build it. You won't find it on Pinterest. So take some time this week to think about every employee's experience working with you. If they're in debt because they took a pay cut to help your business afloat this year, how can you help them back? If they are burning out or exhausted because they're working at home and looking after kids at the same time, how can you help them out? Kindness only comes through the selfless ways you as an employer make life better for your people. And if you're on a run of successful business, kindness is shown time and time again to pay off. If your business isn't about putting your people first, you don't have a business, you have a workhouse. And at this time of year, if it tells us anything, it's that if you're in business, mankind is your business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence are all your business. The deals of your trade are but a drop in the ocean of what you do each day at work. I wish you all a relaxing and peaceful Christmas, and thank you.
Don't leave. Look, that was outstanding. And you taught us to walk the talk instead of just making it a poster. Gethin, outstanding, man. Love you. Love your work. I really do.
Thank you.
Being practical.
Really appreciate you.
God, being practical makes it so down to earth. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.